Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
The rich man pulled her out of the underpass. You, wife, for an hour, just keep quiet. But when the foreigners started speaking French, she turned pale and scribbled on a napkin, leave immediately. He didn't realize right away who it was he had brought along. But before we continue the story, write in the comments what your name is and which city you're from. It was already evening, yet the city still pulsed with movement. The piercing beams of street lamps carved running figures out of the half-darkness. The hum of cars and the relentless buzz of voices blended into a strange cacophony. People hurrying home from work rushed to catch taxis or buses, while nearby, just off to the side, a lively flow of passers-by poured into the underpass near one of the central squares. The air smelled of dust, dampness, and half-forgotten stories. After all, such places often harbored street musicians, beggars, or simply people who had nowhere else to go. Diego, a tall man in his mid-30s with neatly slicked back hair and a fine black coat, stepped out of the rear door of his luxury car and instantly noticed something that caught his eye. His driver was used to the boss's sudden decisions, but still glanced anxiously into the rearview mirror as Diego, ignoring any questions, strode purposefully toward the underpass. Diego, a busy man not prone to sentimentality, suddenly felt compelled to approach the young woman sitting on the cold stone floor by the wall. Her face was thin, yet retained aristocratic sharpness of features. Her grown-out dark hair was tousled, but her wrists were delicate, her hands fine even if dirty. Her clothes looked long unchanged, old jeans, a worn hoodie with the hood down, topped by a jacket far too thin for the cool evening. And yet, in the way she held her back straight, and the nervous flick of her fingers against the collar, it was obvious this girl hadn't been born into poverty. She didn't look like someone who had lived on the streets since childhood. Diego hesitated a moment, wondering why he was even interested, why he couldn't just walk past. But time pressed. He had only 15 minutes before his meeting with foreign investors, and he still had to figure out how to explain why he hadn't shown up with his wife. Of course, he had no wife, and no serious relationships of late either. But the French partners he'd been negotiating with for half a year had hinted, for them, long-term contracts depended not only on numbers, but also on Diego's image as a respectable businessman, family man included. In their circles, success usually meant a stable marriage, and that inspired additional trust. He recalled his advisor's warning: if we want to impress them, make it look perfect, no scandals, no mess, all neat and proper. That was the last piece of advice. Diego hated lying, but he couldn't afford to lose this deal that meant millions in investment for his chain of hotels and restaurants, product expansion, new markets. Breaking into the French market had been a long-held dream. He hadn't managed to find anyone to play the role of a wife, so the sudden idea of a rented wife struck him as impulsive but workable. He saw this girl in the underpass and decided it was his only chance to improvise. Diego stopped in front of her, a banknote clenched in his hand, staring straight into her eyes. What he saw there was despair mixed with strange determination. She raised her gaze, distrust and defiance flashing in it. Diego, wondering if it was even worth trying, quickly thought, how can I convince her? Then he reached out and said casually, almost commandingly, "You're coming with me. Take the money. I want you to walk with me now. You'll have to act like my wife for an hour. Just stay quiet. Understand?" She looked at him as if weighing the degree of his madness. But money, it seemed, she really needed now. And maybe there wasn't another chance. Diego knew he couldn't waste any more time. He almost forced her to her feet by the elbow, helping her up, and though she remained wary, she allowed herself to be led to the car. The driver raised his brows in surprise but didn't ask. He knew his employer made odd decisions sometimes. They sat in the back together. Inside, the air was stuffy, a sharp contrast to the cool outside. Diego offered her a flask of water. She refused, clutching the crumpled bill as if afraid it would be snatched back. He steadied her face again. Despite the fatigue and dirt, she looked refined. Her posture straight, her lips pressed together, her features strikingly beautiful. He stayed silent all the way. She, even more so. The car sped them toward the new business center, where, in one of the upper halls, the meeting with the French investors awaited. As the elevator ascended, Diego quickly whispered to the stranger, "Behave quietly, don't interrupt. Just sit and nod if you have to. Maybe smile a couple of times if I give you a signal. Understood?" The girl pressed her lips together and gave the slightest nod. Diego thought she might not speak at all, and that suited him just fine. All he needed was to impress the guests, to create the appearance that everything was in order in his personal life, dispelling their concerns about instability. They stepped into a spacious hall with panoramic windows overlooking the city lights. Already waiting inside were the representatives of the foreign company, two men in business suits, smiling yet visibly weary from the long flight, accompanied by a translator whose Spanish bore a heavy accent. It was clear the French partners were slightly tense, expecting either a final agreement or, at the very least, strong arguments in favor of collaboration. Diego shook each man's hand, then introduced the stranger, now officially his wife, as Camila. For a fleeting moment, he found it amusing that the name could sound like Camila, my lady of the heart. Though he didn't even know her real name, he had simply blurted out the first feminine name that came to mind. The girl, now Camila, remained silent, head slightly bowed, offering a restrained smile. The coat Diego had draped over her shoulders, though the wrong size, at least hid her shabby clothes. One of the Frenchmen, introducing himself as Charles, asked in broken Spanish where Camila had studied and what she did. Without blinking, Diego spun a quick tale. She's a philologist, does freelance translation work from home now and then, but at the moment she's on a creative break. The girl Camila, for tonight, gave a faint nod, barely lifting her eyes, just enough not to betray her nerves. The investors switched into English, asking several clarifying questions about the partnership, and Diego smoothly followed suit. He was long accustomed to international negotiations. His wife remained in the background. Around the negotiation table, they discussed contract details, possible launch dates for the joint project, how to divide shares, what each partner would contribute, and how quality would be controlled. Charles glanced at Camila now and then, as if trying to grasp why she spoke so little. Diego covered the awkwardness by saying she was tired after a long flight from Europe and wasn't feeling well. Everything seemed to go according to plan. The French, reassured by Diego's apparent family status, asked no probing questions beyond business matters. By the end of the meeting, they agreed to finalize the details over dinner at one of the city's finest restaurants, in a more relaxed atmosphere where they could celebrate the beginning of their cooperation. Diego, taking Camila with him, led her back to the car and drove toward the restaurant. On the way, he tried to explain. "You did fine. Just don't drink too much at the table or start talking. You only need to sit quietly." Staring out the window, the girl suddenly asked, "Is all this really so important that you'd lie about having a wife and drag along the first person you found on the street?" Diego frowned. "It's more important than you can imagine. If this works out, I'll be able to expand my business, open new ventures. Though why am I even telling you this?" The girl sighed, turned away, and for a brief instant he thought he heard her murmur softly, "Yes, your business matters so much more than someone else's life." But he wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. Perhaps it was only his imagination. On the way, Diego decided to buy her decent clothing, at least so she would look the part of his wife. He led her into an upscale boutique, briskly picking out a reasonably fitting dress and shoes, insisting the consultant bring them to the fitting room, giving her no real chance to refuse. At first she resisted, but seeing he was ready to spend money on the spot, she seemed to waver. She changed, and though she remained just as cold and wary, her appearance no longer drew suspicion. The dress flattered her figure, her slightly curled hair looked tidier, and she had freshened her face. At the exit, Diego handed her a handbag with a few accessories to complete the look. He liked what he saw. A flicker of admiration lit his eyes, quickly replaced by a businesslike expression. "Good. Now we can go to the restaurant." There, the French partners awaited Charles, Pierre, and a few invited assistants, including the translator. The restaurant was luxurious, soft lighting, gleaming tableware, vast windows framing the night skyline, the atmosphere inviting confidence. Diego and Camila joined the set table. Appetizers and fine wine were served. Charles joked that he would love to hear Madame's opinion on the new collection of wines being imported into France, but Diego smoothly interjected, "She prefers observing to commenting. Forgive her, sometimes fatigue gets the better of her." The girl stayed silent, smiling occasionally. The conversation drifted from English to Spanish and back again, as often happens when people from several countries meet. The French discussed logistics and customs issues. Diego, with enthusiasm, outlined his plans to open several hotel branches in France, or at least in Europe, and to expand his restaurant network in Latin America, using French cuisine as a signature feature. He was surprised at how calmly he managed to discuss it all, even though beside him sat a mysterious stranger who, in truth, was no more than an unknown woman. Suddenly, Charles turned to his associate and spoke in French. At first Diego paid no attention, but out of the corner of his eye he noticed Camila's face grow pale. He thought perhaps she was feeling unwell. Her fingers, resting on her lap, clenched into fists. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead, and she averted her eyes, pretending to gaze out the window. But Diego saw she was nervous. Charles, noticing too, switched to French and asked her if she was all right. Diego was about to translate, but to his surprise Camila quietly replied in Spanish. "I'm fine, just tired." The Frenchmen exchanged a few whispered words, and Diego caught fragments. Strange, she understands, attention. Something was clearly happening behind their words, because Camila now bit her lip and leaned slightly closer to the table, barely breathing. Diego tried to understand what could have frightened her so badly. Maybe it wasn't the language at all, but something else. For several minutes she looked as if she were battling panic inside herself. Then, under the pretense of adjusting her napkin, she quickly scribbled something on a clean corner of the cloth with a pen she had pulled from her bag. The movement was so discreet almost no one would notice, but Diego, seated beside her, caught the motion of her hand forming words. Camila met his gaze and subtly slid the napkin toward him. He saw the message, "Leave immediately." Diego was utterly bewildered. He raised his brows at her in question, but she only looked back at him with pleading eyes. He saw sweat gathering on her neck as though she were terrified to the point of trembling. He couldn't fathom what had happened, but it was clear she desperately wanted to leave. Had someone recognized her? Or had something in the conversation put her in danger? Not wishing to spoil the atmosphere, Diego improvised an excuse. "Forgive me, gentlemen, but we must step out for a moment. I've just received an urgent message from our lawyer that requires an immediate call." He rose, taking Camila by the hand, ignoring the Frenchman's displeased expressions. Charles, however, gave a polite nod. "Of course, we'll wait." They stepped into the cloakroom area. Lowering his voice, Diego asked, "What the hell is going on? Why are you so pale?" The girl avoided answering directly. She glanced around, as if afraid of being overheard, then exhaled. "You have no idea what you've gotten into. I can't be anywhere near those people. I'm begging you, if you want to stay alive, leave as soon as possible." Diego frowned, speaking quietly but firmly. "Listen, these are my potential partners. I can't just walk away. This is my money, my contract. Explain, what's the danger? What are you talking about?" The girl clenched her fingers and snapped. "It's too serious. I won't tell you anything. I just need to leave. I won't interfere with you, just let me go." Diego hesitated. His mind raced. Was she wanted by the police? Tied to some criminal affair? Was she afraid of being recognized by foreigners? Or had she had some traumatic past in France? Yet something in her voice sounded far too real. Carefully he said, "Wait, we'll make it look like I really do have urgent business that I need to take you to the hospital. That's how I'll frame it. Just play along. We can't offend them, but we'll walk away calmly. All right?" She nodded, though she looked as if she wanted to bolt on her own. Still, she followed him back into the hall, where Diego, in an apologetic tone, explained in English, "I'm terribly sorry. My wife has a sudden health issue. I can't remain. We'll resume tomorrow." The Frenchman looked a little annoyed, but politely wished Camila well. Diego only hoped they hadn't noticed how pale and shaken she was. Once outside, Diego called for the car. While waiting for the driver, he tried to press her. "Tell me something. What was all that? Why the performance?" he asked in a near whisper. The girl's face darkened as she remembered clutching the napkin. A shadow of fear crossed her features. "I can't say. Or rather, I don't want to," she replied. "Consider it none of your business. Thank you for getting me out, but I have to go my own way now." Diego suddenly realized he didn't want to let her slip away so easily. This girl, whose origins were a mystery, was clearly terrified of those French-speaking men, and maybe she had good reason. Yet alongside the curiosity rising in him, he felt something stronger, that he simply couldn't abandon her. As if she wasn't just a chance encounter, but part of some puzzle he was already entangled in. He reached out a hand. "Look, of course you can leave. But take a look at yourself. You're shaking. It's dangerous on the streets at night, and you're dressed far too lightly for this weather. Even with the new things I bought you, it doesn't solve your problems. Where will you go in the middle of the night?" The girl glanced around, then stubbornly answered, "I'll find a place to stay. That's not your concern." Diego let out an exasperated sigh. Deep down, it stung that she was ungrateful and unwilling to reveal even a sliver of her secrets. But he forced himself to soften his tone. "All right, that's your decision. But I invite you to spend the night at my place. Tomorrow we'll figure out what's what. I'm not asking anything from you. I just don't want to feel guilty if something happens to you." She looked at him, an inner conflict flaring in her eyes, but fear and exhaustion seemed to win out. "All right," she said quietly, "but only for one night. And don't think I belong to you, or that I owe you anything. Diego nodded, slipping his hand into his coat pocket for the keys. Soon the car pulled up, and they got inside. As the driver pulled away, Diego tried once more to ask questions, but Camila leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes, erecting an invisible wall against further conversation. So they rode in silence. Diego stole glances at her, noticing how thin dark strands escaped her hair, how her shoulders stayed tense as if she were ready to bolt at any second. He couldn't understand what it was about her that so completely held his attention. He wasn't used to being with a woman who didn't seek his favor, didn't admire his achievements, didn't try to please him. But here it was different. Her gaze held not awe, but something like contempt, mixed with fear and dignity, a combination he had never encountered before. The driver delivered them to Diego's home, a spacious penthouse in one of the city's modern high-rises. They ascended in the elevator, the dim cabin lined with mirrors. In the reflection, Diego noticed the weary girl staring at the floor. When the doors opened, they stepped into the apartment, where every detail of the design was carefully planned, stylish and sleek. Expensive furniture, wide windows, soft lighting in the hallway and living room. The girl fell silent, apparently unused to seeing such luxury up close. Diego took off his coat, asked her to sit in the living room, and offered tea or coffee. She hunched forward on the edge of the sofa and replied, "No, thank you." Then, glancing around, she added, "You live here alone? Big place." Diego answered, "Yes, alone. Sometimes I have guests, but mostly I'm used to solitude. My parents have been living in the U.S. for a long time, and I don't have many friends. Everyone's busy with their own lives. Besides, work takes most of my time." She stayed quiet, observing the interior. Diego noticed the way her eyes seemed to linger on the painting on the wall, on the ceramic vase on the shelf, as if she recognized such things or knew something about them. He asked, "Are you an art historian?" The girl twisted her lips oddly and said, "No, not exactly." The conversation faltered, and Diego went to fetch her a blanket and pillow. He offered her the chance to shower and then rest on the sofa. At least here she would be safer than in the underpass. She agreed. When she emerged from the bathroom, she was dressed in clean home clothes, an old tracksuit Diego had found for her. She lay down on the sofa, staring up at the ceiling. Diego lingered for a while in the living room, torn between irritation at her secrecy, curiosity, and an unfamiliar desire to protect her. "Listen," he said, "tomorrow we have to meet them again, the Frenchmen. I need to know what you're so afraid of. Do you speak French? Why did you react the way you did to their words?" The girl turned away. "I'm tired. Tomorrow. If I'm still here." Diego realized he would get no answers that night. He wished her good night and went to his room, already sensing that tomorrow would bring more tension. Thus ended an evening full of uncertainty. Diego had received no clear explanations, yet now a stranger who seemed terrified of the French was sleeping in his home. He himself didn't understand why he had allowed himself to be drawn into this story, one he now had no choice but to unravel. The girl he had named Camila lay awake, listening to the rhythmic hum of the air conditioner, perhaps tormented by the thought of whether she had made the right choice in agreeing to come. On one hand, she was safe at least for a night. On the other, what guarantee was there that Diego wouldn't throw her out tomorrow if she refused to play along? What if those men who spoke French already knew who she really was? Should she keep pretending to be Diego's wife, just for the sake of his business? Many questions remained unanswered, but one thing was clear: the outcome of this deal might determine not only a business contract, but also the girl's very life and Diego's reputation. Outside, the city lights flickered and dimmed, while the moon alone stood as an indifferent witness to the unfolding drama, where greed, secrets, and an unexpected spark of compassion had begun to intertwine, perhaps into something real. Camila awoke to the faint morning light filtering through the sheer curtains. For a moment she vaguely remembered being brought into this unfamiliar apartment, polished and luxurious as if torn from the pages of a glossy magazine. She didn't immediately understand where she was, and panic gripped her, the fear that once again she was in a strange place, where she might be discovered by the very people she had been running from. Then the memories of the evening resurfaced: Diego, his calm yet tense voice, his sudden invitation to spend the night, and the strange events at the restaurant where she had almost exposed herself to the Frenchman, recklessly agreeing to play his wife. She sat up on the sofa in the spacious living room, taking in the lavish surroundings, the glass wall with a view of the city, polished parquet floors, expensive furniture, and neatly arranged bookshelves. On one of the shelves she noticed books in several languages, even French. She quickly averted her gaze, unwilling to think of it, still shivering faintly at the memory of last night. Stretching, she noticed she was dressed in the clean, slightly oversized tracksuit Diego had given her. The fabric felt strange on her body, unusual in its warmth without the chill she had grown used to. Camila listened carefully. The apartment was not empty, someone was moving about. The thought ripened quickly, it was time to leave before it was too late. She had never liked depending on others. I'll go, without disturbing anyone, while he's still asleep, she thought, sliding carefully off the sofa in search of her shoes. But at that moment Diego appeared from the kitchen. His hair was slightly tousled, he wore an expensive robe, but his eyes were already alert. He noticed she was standing. "You're awake. How did you sleep?" She shrugged awkwardly and answered quietly. "Fine. Thank you for the roof over my head, but now I should go." Diego stepped lightly into her path, not roughly, but firmly. "Wait, it doesn't work like that. Where do you think you're going so early? Do you realize we have a full day ahead of us?" She looked at him as though he were speaking a foreign language. "What day? I have nothing to do with your affairs. I'm not supposed to stay here." Diego shook his head. "Not quite true. Yesterday we started a game where you're my wife, and I can't just tell the partners it's over. It's not only my reputation at risk, but a multi-million-dollar deal that depends on my image of family stability. So either we keep up the act, or I'm in serious trouble." Camila tilted her head, a wry smile flickering. "And what do I get out of risking my life by showing up again near those people? The moment I hear French, I shake. I don't want to meet them." Diego paused, then said, "Listen, you don't have to engage with them. Just be by my side officially. I only need you to appear when necessary, and at least tell me what scares you so much. Maybe I can do something to protect you." Camila stayed silent for a long time, then whispered, "I have issues with my documents, and those people who are looking for me. I don't want to go into details, not now. Just believe me, they're very dangerous." She didn't specify who she meant, but Diego's expression darkened in thought. "Do you mean people connected with the Frenchman or something else entirely?" he asked. Camila bit her lip and turned away toward the window. Diego sighed. "All right, I see you're not ready to share. But let's do this. If you stay and play the role of my wife at upcoming events, I'll help keep you safe. I have contacts with lawyers, I can even hire security. But I need to know at least what we're hiding from." Camila hesitated. The idea of having someone who could actually help was tempting. She was tired of sleeping in underpasses, constantly fearing recognition or capture. A glance at the apartment, at its well-kept order, at Diego's face where, even through the sharp lines, something human showed through, convinced her that staying might be less risky than going back to the streets. "Fine," she said softly. "For now. Until I sort out my issues. I trust you won't betray me." Diego exhaled slowly, relieved. "I won't. I'm taking a risk for you too, don't forget. We'll treat it as an agreement. And by the way, if you want breakfast, everything's ready in the kitchen. I had food delivered. I hope you don't mind." She looked at him uncertainly, but her stomach betrayed her, and she made her way toward the kitchen. There, in the spacious room, dishes from a well-known restaurant were laid neatly out in stylish packaging. For the first time in a long while, Camila felt she could have a proper meal. She sat, picked up a piece of bread, cutting it carefully as though afraid to mar the immaculate tablecloth. Then she noticed her hand trembling slightly from inattention. Too many changes had come in one night. Diego set a cup of coffee before her, watching as she tried to manage her unease. "You can relax. It's just us here," he said, pouring himself some juice. She sipped, then glanced at the windows where the sun was climbing over the city skyline, and suddenly realized she couldn't remember the last time she had sat at a table like this, eating in peace, without fear of being found. At some point her eyes landed on a shelf with several French books: The Human Condition, The Little Prince, and a few other classics. She bit her lip and forced herself to look away, afraid of revealing her curiosity. Memories threatened to surface of a past where she might have studied in a prestigious school, with French and English in the curriculum, of teachers' faces, of rare trips to Europe. All of it crashing down when she was pulled into a dark story that had forced her to run. But she pushed the memories aside, focusing on the present. "You like French literature?" Diego asked suddenly. She flinched almost imperceptibly but tried to keep her composure. "I can't say I love it. I just read it sometimes." Diego shrugged. "I've read some too, but I don't know the language well. Those books were gifts from partners meant as encouragement to learn French for business expansion. But I've never gotten around to it, no time. And I noticed your reaction to the French wasn't exactly neutral." Still, never mind, I won't pry. Camila silently bit into her bread, then tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. You said you have a chain of restaurants and hotels. Is it a family business, or did you build it from scratch? Diego answered unexpectedly willingly. I started back in my student days, opened a small bar with a friend. Then he dropped out, and I took out a loan, mortgaged everything I had, and took the risk to expand. Bit by bit, I opened a couple more restaurants, gradually got wealthier. Later I moved into hotels. I now own several across the country. My parents moved to the U.S. They've never cared much about my work, so I had to rely only on myself. I had a few investors, but that was messy and full of scandals. I almost got married once, but realized it wasn't worth it. The only reason they wanted me as a husband was for money or status. So it's not as romantic as it might sound. Camila felt a sudden pang of sympathy. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. Now she understood why he insisted on projecting the image of a respectable family man to his partners. He was tired of the sideways glances and the gossip that branded him a bachelor, unstable, unreliable, incomplete. It felt awkward, because if she hadn't appeared in his life, he might have found someone else to play the role. And yet he had chosen her, pulled her straight off the street. Absurd, maybe. But seeing the detachment in his eyes now, she couldn't help but feel a trace of pity. I understand, she murmured. Diego looked at her, noticing the flicker of understanding in her gaze, and something like silent agreement settled between them. Later, as breakfast wound down, Camila once again made a move to leave, but Diego gently stopped her. Please, stay. At least for today, and for the next week we have meetings scheduled. I don't want everything to fall apart. In return, I promise to help you with safety. Besides, you said yourself your documents aren't in order? Camila answered grimly. Yes, I need to restore some papers. I've long feared certain people might track me down. That's why I hide. Diego frowned, picked up his phone from the table. All right, I know a lawyer. We can talk to him about helping you, maybe get temporary documents sorted. But for that, I need at least your real name. The girl clasped her hands tightly inside. Let it be Camila. I'm not ready to tell you my real name. Not even you. Diego lowered the phone. Fine, Camila for now. But are you sure you don't want to tell me more about who's after you? She fell into tortured silence, images flashing in her mind, faces of people she'd once encountered abroad, a group tied not only to crime but to powerful connections in high places. Thinking about it was both painful and terrifying. Finally, she exhaled. Not now. The morning passed quietly. Camila wandered through the apartment, noticing its tastefully chosen details yet also its cold emptiness. No feminine touches, no family photos, no warmth of home. It was clear the owner spent little time here, and when he did, he didn't trouble himself with personal touches. For a moment, she understood that behind the polished luxury lay loneliness, and she felt a kinship with that, having lived so long alone, without close ones. She recalled her own past life, when she had once belonged to a circle that considered her special. The memory stung, all of it lost. At some point, she picked up a book of French poetry and, leafing through, realized she still remembered some lines by heart. It stirred painful memories. She had studied at a prestigious school in Switzerland, mingled with foreign students, even spent time in Paris on exchange. And there she had stumbled into a story that forced her to flee. Fragments flickered in her mind: men in suits, negotiations about contracts, her father demanding she return home, tears, running away, the fear of being forced to betray her conscience. It was too heavy to bear, and Camila snapped the book shut, unwilling to dig deeper. When she left the living room, Diego was already dressed in a business suit, ready to go. Listen, I'll be gone for an hour, need to check one of my restaurants. You can stay here. Lock the door if you like, no one will come in without warning. Then I'll return, and we'll go together to the office for the second meeting with the Frenchman. It won't be formal, so you probably won't have to sit long. Just appear at the right moment, and then we'll leave together. Can you manage? Camila smirked faintly. I'm used to strange roles. Diego gave a short nod and left. Camila remained alone, glancing around. Unwillingly, she admitted this apartment really did feel safe. But she also knew Diego hadn't offered her help out of pure altruism. He needed peace of mind and the appearance of stability for his deals with the French, and she was simply part of his plan. Some time passed. Alone in the apartment, she didn't dare turn on the television or the computer, afraid of leaving a trace, afraid someone could track her down. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. A woman's voice asked, "Hello, this is a delivery of groceries and some papers for Mr. Diego. May I come in?" Camila froze, unsure how to respond, but then remembered Diego's words that no one would come without warning. Something wasn't right. Carefully, without opening the door, she pressed the intercom button and asked quietly, "And who are you?" The voice below gave a name, claiming to be Diego's assistant, but Camila wasn't convinced. In the end, she refused entry, saying Diego had told her not to let anyone in without his personal call. The woman muttered a curse under her breath and left. Camila's heart clenched. What if someone was already looking for her? She listened intently to the silence, realizing how much more she valued the fragile safety this apartment provided. A panicked thought struck her. Perhaps they had already tracked her down. Hours later, Diego returned, and Camila told him about the strange call. He studied her carefully. "That could have been my former assistant, who might have found out I'm in the city. But she wouldn't just show up without notice. Either way, good that you didn't open. Next time, I'll let you know in advance if someone's coming." Then he called his lawyer and set up a meeting, explaining that he had someone who needed to restore certain documents, possibly temporary papers and permits, and asked him to find a solution. That evening they went to the office for a short meeting with the Frenchman, who brought more papers for review. Camila tried to stay in the background, but one of the partners, Pierre, smiled and attempted to speak with her, switching into French. Camila instantly tensed, but Diego smoothly translated Pierre's words, pretending she didn't understand the language well, and steered the conversation elsewhere. After a brief round of business, Diego excused them. As they stepped outside, he whispered, "You really do speak French, don't you? Maybe it's better if you just admit it. That way I wouldn't have to keep covering." Camila hissed back, "Don't. It's safer this way. If they realize I understand every word, I'll be in trouble." Diego bit his lip. "Sounds like you're already in trouble, but fine, let's keep it as is. I told them you speak only English and that you've been having some health issues." Camila grimaced, aware of how absurd the whole charade was. On the drive back, Diego received a call from security at one of his restaurants. "Boss, a man came by a couple days ago, asking about you where you usually go, said he had a personal matter to discuss." Diego pressed for a description, and unease gripped him clearly. Someone was looking for him. Maybe this wasn't just about business. Maybe it had everything to do with the girl he was hiding. When the call ended, Diego turned to Camila. "Someone's been asking about me, and I can't shake the feeling it's connected to you." Camila clasped her hands. "Most likely, yes. I told you someone's hunting me, but I don't even know exactly what they want. Or I do, but I won't say." Diego whistled under his breath. "Damn, looks like I'm in deeper than I thought. But backing out isn't an option now, not without ruining things with the French partners. And," he hesitated, searching for the words, "well, I'd hate to leave you in this state." Camila looked at him with gratitude, a strange warmth rising inside her. She wasn't used to anyone caring about her. It felt almost like having a protector, but still she was afraid to trust fully. That night, when they returned to the apartment, Diego advised her to stay with him at least until the contract was signed. "After that, maybe we'll find you a safer place or figure out what to do about these people." Camila answered darkly, "I don't want to put you in danger, but I don't think it's so easy to walk away from them. I'd run, but I'm tired of running." Diego replied, "Then it's better to stand together. If you really are in danger, we'll find a way to set up protection." She gave a crooked smile. Gratitude flickered in her, though the words stuck in her throat. She couldn't put her feelings into shape. This man, who had pulled her from an underpass just the day before and made her his fake wife, was suddenly showing a kind of humanity she hadn't expected. Maybe he simply didn't want to lose his advantage, but there was something genuine in his voice. Days passed, and their conversations grew a little friendlier. When they were alone in the apartment, he told her about his plans to open another restaurant, this one focused on French cuisine, though he feared failure because competition was fierce. He confessed he had once thought of moving to the U.S., but stayed, feeling he could achieve more in his own country. Sometimes Camila would make remarks about how peculiar French culture was, and despite her constant caution, she occasionally felt the urge to share her knowledge of European life. Diego, surprised, observed, "You seem to know a lot about how things work there. Where does that kind of knowledge come from?" But Camila only deflected with a half smile. "I've read a lot, and I had the chance to meet different kinds of people." He noticed how every evening she stood at the window, staring out at the city as if calculating escape routes or recalling another life. Sometimes she would freeze in front of a mirror, as if not recognizing herself in the reflection, dressed in borrowed though comfortable clothes. Diego began to grow accustomed to her presence in the apartment. He saw that she kept the kitchen tidy, sometimes even cooked before he woke up, and she did it with a skill that didn't fit the image of someone who had lived on the streets. Occasionally, she asked him for access to foreign news to keep track of world events. He never refused, though he noticed how she read anxiously, sighing before closing the browser. That tension never left her, not even here, where it should have been safe. Meanwhile, Diego began receiving troubling signs. Anonymous threats reached his inbox, warning that if he continued supporting a certain woman, he might lose everything. He couldn't understand how these people had even obtained his private email address. The messages were written in a strange mix of French and English. Diego translated them into Spanish and showed them to Camila. Her face went deathly pale, proof this was serious. She had been found, and now they were threatening not just her, but the man sheltering her. "They won't leave me alone," she whispered. Reading the fear in her eyes, Diego felt an unexpected surge of determination that outweighed logic. "I won't back down. I have enough resources to protect us both. But you need to help me to be my wife until the deal is signed. Then we'll decide how to get you out of this." Camila lowered her gaze. "All right, I will." It was at that moment they sealed their unspoken pact of mutual benefit. She needed protection, he needed the reputation of a respectable family man. That night, as darkness settled outside, they sat together in the living room, reviewing printed documents. Diego clarified the requirements for their upcoming meeting with the lawyer. Camila caught his gaze. There was warmth in it, and she quickly looked away, flustered. Fear and shadows from her past still haunted her, yet here, beside Diego, she felt safer than she had in months. She was afraid to admit even to herself that she was beginning to feel something more than gratitude. Diego, sliding the papers into a folder, wondered if it was worth it. He was risking not only money and a major project but, it seemed, his heart, because this girl was dangerously captivating. The next morning, Camila sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, staring thoughtfully at the city. Her soul felt caught between tension and lightness, as if she wanted to run again, but something anchored her. In recent days, a strange warmth had formed between her and Diego. They weren't just playing the roles of efficient spouses in front of the French investors. They were spending evenings talking, even brushing on subjects people usually entrusted only to close friends. And yet, her secrets remained between them. Every time Diego tried to probe deeper, she withdrew, afraid that opening up would make her more vulnerable. Diego, meanwhile, grew angry at himself for letting emotions interfere with his pragmatic outlook on life. But he couldn't deny it. This girl was taking root in his mind. He saw her on the balcony and quietly asked if she was all right. She gave a faint smile. "Yes, just thinking about how far we've already gone." Diego stepped closer, resting a hand on the railing, silent and tense. Camila felt his presence, her chest tightening. She longed to confess that she still lay awake at night, afraid of hearing French spoken again, afraid of the shivers it gave her. But old habits prevailed. She only shrugged, pushing away the sudden urge to lean against him. He studied her delicate shoulders and suddenly asked in a low voice, "You weren't always this guarded, were you? Surely you had friends, maybe family, loving parents. Why do I feel that something in your past forced you to hide, and that's why you can't trust me fully?" Camila tried to hold his gaze calmly. "You're right, I don't fully trust you. But not because I don't want to. Because it's dangerous. Dangerous for me, and maybe for you. I'd rather carry it myself than drag you into it." Diego frowned, his voice quiet but firm. "Too late. I'm already involved. If I could walk away, I would. But it looks like I can't." He fell silent, and the air between them filled with unspoken words. Camila turned away so he wouldn't see the turmoil in her eyes. That afternoon they drove to another meeting with the French investors, where the preliminary terms of cooperation were to be signed. In the car, Diego was tense and silent. From the corner of her eye, Camila saw his hands gripping the wheel, his cold focus fixed straight ahead. She wanted to tell him she understood how much the deal meant to him, that she felt guilty because his need to protect her forced him into constant improvisation. But the words stuck in her throat. They entered the office, and once again Camila slipped on the mask of a calm wife, greeting Charles and Pierre with a polite nod. The Frenchman smiled, continuing their game of courtesy, while Diego tried to maintain the appearance of control, even as a mix of irritation and anxiety for the girl at his side boiled inside him. During negotiations they discussed contract details, timelines, finances, plans for joint development. Camila listened, catching French words that made her pulse race each time. She noticed how easily they shifted between French and English, mentioning names and companies she recognized all too well, though she pretended not to understand a thing. When the meeting ended, Charles, smiling, invited Diego and his wife to an informal reception at a colleague's country estate to celebrate our partnership and secure the spirit of our cooperation in a more relaxed setting. Diego tried to decline, citing his busy schedule, but saw his partner's displeasure. To them, it was essential to maintain the illusion of being one big family. In the end, Diego was forced to agree. Hearing of the reception, Camila clenched her hands. Her eyes darted nervously. She knew that in a freer setting it would be harder to preserve her anonymity, harder to hide behind silence. Still, she understood refusal would arouse suspicion and could spell disaster for Diego. The reception came quickly, only a day later. A luxurious country house, expansive grounds with gardens, fountains, wrought iron gates, and a driveway packed with expensive cars. Camila wore an elegant evening gown Diego had chosen especially for such occasions. As she stepped inside, a sharp sense of foreboding washed over her. Something was bound to happen tonight. Diego, reserved, held her by the arm. The Frenchmen in their circle greeted them warmly, offering champagne. The air buzzed with French and English chatter, occasionally punctuated with Spanish. Pierre led them to an influential-looking man. Meet our partner and longtime friend, also a renowned philanthropist. He gave a French name. At once, Camila felt her insides collapse. The man's face seemed vaguely familiar. From the depths of memory surfaced an image of family receptions long ago, when she had still been a girl. The man studied her intently, narrowing his eyes as though trying to recall where he'd seen her. Diego, not noticing, greeted him politely, speaking of business. But at that moment the stranger's eyes widened. "My God! Wait, I know you?" he asked in French, staring at Camila. She stoically tried to appear uncomprehending, but he pressed on, seemingly convinced he had recognized her features. "Are you?" And then he spoke her real name. Camila involuntarily flinched, though she struggled to keep a neutral face. Diego, sensing the shift in atmosphere, asked in English, "What's going on?" The man switched to English, speaking excitedly. He claimed he had seen this young woman in France, that she resembled the daughter of a prominent figure, perhaps a politician or public leader whose disappearance had recently stirred conversation in certain circles. Camila tried to step aside, but the man caught her hand. "Mademoiselle, you've been searched for, haven't you? Your father has been terribly worried." Diego was stunned. He looked at Camila, who had shrunk back, unable to speak. A crowd was already forming, and before everyone's eyes the scene of revelation unfolded. This modest wife of a Latin American businessman was not poor Camila at all, but a missing Frenchwoman of a powerful family name. Blushing, her throat tightening with tears, Camila muttered through clenched teeth to Diego, "We have to leave. Now." But voices in the crowd rose, people recalling how her father, a respected politician and academic with wealth and influence, had searched desperately after her disappearance, appealed to the press, hired detectives, trying to understand where she had gone. Snatches of phrases reached her scandal. The family thought she'd run away. Others whispered she'd been kidnapped. No one knew what had become of her. Maybe she was hiding because of threats. Camila winced, and for the first time she intervened directly. "I don't want to explain anything. Forgive me if I misled anyone. Diego, take me away from here." But Diego didn't move, still frozen in shock, only now realizing he had been beside not a random girl, but the daughter of an influential man, an heiress caught in the center of an international scandal. His gaze hardened. "You lied to me. Why did you keep silent? I've been dragged into a story that could destroy my entire reputation. You have no idea how complicated it is." The guests pressed closer, whispering, their curiosity swelling. Camila, her voice breaking, shot back, "You're the one who dragged me into this game of being your wife. I only wanted to hide, to escape my pursuers. No one was supposed to know I was in Latin America." Diego's lips curled with bitter irony. "You didn't think to warn me that your father is a famous man and that maybe the entire criminal underworld is hunting you?" She snapped. "Yes, because I didn't know if I could trust you. And what difference does it make? I don't have a normal relationship with my father. I ran away from all of that, and now it's all come back." At that moment Pierre hurried over, trying to defuse the situation, insisting everything was fine and that no one would make a fuss. But it was obvious rumors were already spreading among the guests. Camila looked at Diego with tears frozen in her eyes, while faint whispers and the sound of phone snapping pictures stirred behind her. Finally, she tugged on Diego's hand. "Let's go." Reluctantly, he followed her to the exit. They got into the car. Diego ordered the driver to move, and the silence in the cabin grew thick and suffocating, full of accusations neither of them could voice calmly. When they reached his apartment, Camila climbed out first, Diego right behind her. She shook off his hand roughly as he tried to stop her in the hallway. "Aren't you tired of dragging me wherever you want? I'm not your rented wife anymore. You heard what they said in there. I come from another life, with other problems, and all I've done is pull you into real danger." Diego exploded. "Of course you did. I could lose everything if the truth about my dealings comes out about how I passed a stranger off as my wife. Don't you understand my partners could see me as a fraud, cancel the deal, even press charges for deception?" Camila's voice broke as tears streamed down her face. "And what about me risking my life? What about my enemies hunting me? I forget it. It's none of your business." Diego shot her a furious look. "Why isn't it my business? You lived in my home. I spent my time, my money, even my feelings." He faltered on the last word, as though exposing a vulnerability he hadn't meant to. Camila caught it and whispered, "Feelings? You just used me to look like a happy family man. I was nothing more than something you could rent out of a subway tunnel, wasn't I?" Diego remembered that night he pulled her off the street, and shame mixed with anger inside him. He nearly shouted, "Yes, back then I didn't care who you were. But now it's different." Camila wouldn't listen. Through tears, she cried out, "No, it's not. You wanted me for your benefit. And now, knowing I'm tangled in something even bigger, you don't know what to do with me. Fine. I'll go. That's what you wanted all along, isn't it?" In despair, Diego threw up his hand. "Go then, if that's what you want. I don't care. Just don't you dare ask me for help later." His voice sounded cruel, though inside he felt only pain. Camila grabbed her bag and stormed out. Diego didn't stop her, though part of him longed to say she mattered to him. He couldn't bear to risk more rejection. Better to end it. The door slammed. The apartment fell into deafening silence. Diego sank onto the sofa, eyes closed, drained. Meanwhile, Camila wandered the night city in despair. She had nowhere to sleep and knew her name would soon spread through business circles. By tomorrow, her enemies might already know she was in Latin America and perhaps even guess where. Calling her father was out of the question, memories of old conflicts still raw. Reaching out to old acquaintances was too dangerous, they might lead her pursuers straight to her. Yet staying on the street was just as risky. Those hunting her surely knew her face. Near dawn she slipped into a narrow back alley between warehouses, a relatively quiet spot to rest. She closed her eyes, the damp tropical air clinging to her skin. Then a shadow. She flinched, instantly knowing something was wrong. Two burly men in black jackets emerged from the darkness, closing in fast. One of them spoke in French. "Finally, we've found you." He smirked at her terrified face. Camila recoiled, tried to run, but the other man seized her arm. She clawed at him, trying to break free, screaming, but the alley was empty, no one to hear. The man twisted her wrists, shoving her toward a car parked a short distance away. Panic surged. She bit his wrist, thrashed, but her strength was no match. She knew if they took her, it would end in tragedy. She would become leverage to blackmail her father, or worse, be silenced forever. In a desperate burst, she tore her hand free and bolted toward the mouth of the alley, screaming at the top of her lungs for a miracle. A brief scuffle followed. One of the men pulled something that looked like a gun. But just then sirens wailed in the distance. Perhaps a passing police patrol. The men hesitated, not eager to attract attention. For a moment they debated between finishing quickly or retreating. By sheer luck, Camila slipped from their grasp and ran. Fear drove her forward. She stumbled, scraping her knees, but pushed herself up and kept running. Behind her, she still heard pursuit for a few agonizing moments until flashing patrol lights swept the street. The kidnappers fell back, disappearing into the shadows to avoid being seen. Barely breathing, Camila ran in the opposite direction, hardly aware of where her feet carried her. Tears streamed from her eyes, and her heart pounded as if it might burst from her chest. That same evening, Diego received a call from one of his acquaintances. Someone had heard rumors on the streets about an attack on a girl who had nearly been kidnapped. The description was vague, but it mentioned she might have spoken French and looked like a foreigner. A burning anxiety hit Diego. He immediately connected it to Camila. He knew the city was full of criminals and mercenaries who might have been after her for a long time. If they had identified her, she was in mortal danger. His pride vanished. Anger and resentment faded against the thought that she could be in those men's hands. He rushed to his car, calling every contact he had, trying to find out where she might have gone. His heart hammered as he realized he had no idea she had no friends here, no place to stay. He asked himself why he had said those terrible words, why he had let her walk out alone. His usual rationality was gone. He acted on raw emotion, unable to abandon her to her fate, despite all the lies and mysteries surrounding her. He started combing the streets near his home, checking the same places where he had once found her, questioning passers-by, but to no avail. No one had seen a girl matching her description. Meanwhile, Camila, miraculously escaping the abduction, spent the rest of the night in a small abandoned building on the edge of the city. She hardly realized how she had stumbled there, driven only by the thought of staying alive and out of her pursuer's hands. She sat huddled in a dark corner, back against a cracked wall, trembling with fear and the chill of the night. Her clothes were torn, dried blood marked her knees from fresh scrapes, and her hands still ached from the violent struggle. Near dawn she dozed off, but every sound jolted her awake. Deep down, she knew it was too dangerous to stay. They were already searching for her. If anyone tipped off the police, or worse, the criminals chasing her, she would be caught. She had to leave the country before it was too late. The ground was slipping from under her feet again. She had no documents, almost no money, and the one person she might have counted on, Diego, she had quarreled with bitterly. Tears welled in her eyes as she recalled his accusations, and her own words, hurled in despair. She knew she was partly to blame. If only she hadn't hidden such vital truths, if only she had tried to explain. But now, perhaps, there was no way back. By morning she slipped through alleys until she reached an internet cafe near the bus station. For a few coins, she bought an hour of access, enough to look for ways to get out. Her eyes flicked nervously to the screen, afraid she might be recognized or tracked by the cameras. She searched bus routes to neighboring countries, only to learn that traveling on forged documents was extremely risky. Through a shadowy online forum, she found someone who suggested illegal border crossings, but that promised even greater dangers. She printed out a short note with addresses where fake papers could be obtained, shuddering at the risk. Still, she decided to make one last attempt at freedom. If she stayed, they would surely find her. Her thoughts returned to her family, the very people she had fled. Perhaps her father really was looking for her, but going back would mean falling straight into the trap she had been running from all along. 1,000 questions spun in her mind, fear still crushing her chest. Meanwhile, Diego hadn't slept all night. He kept calling acquaintances, hoping someone might know where Camila had gone. She had left with nothing but her old bag. He cursed himself for his harsh words, even as he regretted her constant lies. By dawn his nerves were fraying, when word came that people were still searching for the girl all over the city. Some insisted she was in serious trouble. Diego made up his mind he would use every resource he had. He hired private investigators, called in hotel and restaurant security staff, tried to trace her steps, asking everywhere if anyone had seen her. Finally, someone reported a sighting near the bus station. Diego jumped in his car and sped to the area, knowing she would stand out. Her clothes were likely in tatters, her strength fading. Camila, having found no safe way to leave the country, began looking for shelter. On the way, she contacted a shady man who promised her passage across the border with borrowed documents. He arranged a meeting on the outskirts, near a cluster of warehouses, claiming that all the papers could be arranged quietly there. Camila understood it looked like a trap, but she had no other option. She agreed, moving there under the cover of dusk, keeping to the shadows. She approached the gates of an old warehouse, where the man was already waiting in his shabby jacket, unhealthy eyes fixed on her. He told her the documents wouldn't come cheap. What did she have on her right now? Lowering her eyes, Camila pulled the remaining money from her bag, regretting she hadn't taken more from Diego. Not that she'd wanted to, but doubting it would be enough. The man looked her over with a mocking grin, then suddenly gestured to someone in the shadows. 2 more figures stepped out, thuggish men, unmistakably criminals. Camila's heart clenched. She realized this wasn't just a shady deal. She was about to be grabbed, maybe sold off, or worse, delivered to those hunting her. She wanted to run, but it was too late. They seized her shoulders and shoved her against the wall. One of them sneered, "We've got a contract on your head. Don't make this difficult. The client pays well." She struggled desperately, knowing this was the end. She had no strength left to break free. Then came the screech of brakes. The glare of headlights cut across the men. Camila froze at the familiar sound. It was Diego's car. 2 bodyguards leapt out, weapons drawn, and Diego himself charged forward, closing the distance in seconds. He saw her pinned and didn't hesitate. A brutal scuffle erupted. Diego's men shoved the attackers back. Shouts, curses, the thud of blows. Diego reached Camila, pulling her away from the brute who held her. She trembled, pressed against the wall, clutching a metal rod she had snatched in a futile attempt to defend herself. Diego dragged her aside while his men subdued 2 of the thugs. A third broke free and bolted, disappearing into the shadows. Dazed, Camila stared at Diego, who was panting heavily, his clothes smeared, hands trembling with adrenaline. She wanted to speak, but only managed to whisper. "You, how did you know?" Diego threw his jacket around her, gripping her firmly as he pulled her toward the car. His voice was low, rough. "I searched for you all night. I couldn't just leave it." His eyes burned feverishly, but beneath them was unmistakable relief he had made it in time. They drove off, leaving the guards to decide whether to call the police or simply let the men go. Diego knew they ought to file a report, but Camila, gasping, begged him not to. Her official appearance would only cause greater problems if the wrong people in France learned where she was. Diego didn't argue. He saw she was on the edge of collapse. He simply nodded, at least until he could sort things out. He guided her into the car, where she sobbed silently, her head bowed. Back at his apartment, they climbed upstairs together. Camila was trembling, her soul in turmoil. She asked for water, and when Diego handed her a glass, she looked into his eyes and knew she couldn't keep silent anymore. She was exhausted of fear, of running, of half-truths. At last, trembling, she asked him to listen. "I'll tell you everything. Just don't interrupt," she whispered. Diego, sensing the gravity of the moment, nodded. Wrapped in a blanket on the couch, Camila began. She told him how she had once lived in France, daughter of an important man, a politician with ties in financial and government circles. He had tried to shape her life by his rules, even choosing a husband from a powerful family to strengthen his own alliances. She had resisted, but then uncovered something worse. Her father was entangled in corruption schemes, and her marriage was part of a grand deal. Her freedom had never mattered. He saw her as a tool. When she began to push back, the threats came. Someone in her father's circle hinted she knew too much and could become a target for hired killers. That was when she ran, hoping Latin America would be beyond their reach. She had studied in an international school, knew Spanish well. Her childhood nanny had been Mexican. But her enemies had tracked her, and her father never stopped searching, knowing that if she spoke, she could ruin him. She disguised herself as a destitute girl, lived on the streets to leave no trace, avoided any French speakers. But once she crossed paths with Diego, hiding grew harder. People noticed her beside a wealthy businessman. And now, everything she had fought to bury had exploded into the open. Her voice faltered as she finished, gripping the glass with pale fingers. Diego sat beside her, breath heavy, trying to absorb her words. The bitterness in him was sharp. He felt betrayed, deceived, but gradually he understood why she had seemed so distant. Finally, he spoke. It hurt him deeply, but he admitted he couldn't deny it. He didn't want to lose her. He confessed that when he first staged this game of having a wife for show, it was selfish. He wanted the contract. But somewhere along the way, she had become more than just a role. He hated the lies, the deception, but he thought he could understand, and he was willing to help. Camila suddenly covered her face with her hands, sobbing with relief. She had feared he would turn away forever. Diego, torn between anger and tenderness, pulled her close, whispering, "We'll find a way out, but please never hide anything from me again." The next morning, Diego's phone rang incessantly, calls from the French investors. They were anxious. After the scandal at the reception, his and his wife's reputations were hanging by a thread. They laid down new terms. If Camila was truly connected to criminal or political scandals, the deal was off. They demanded that Diego either publicly renounce the story, proving he had nothing to do with the adventuress, or else lose the contract. Diego looked at Camila, who had gone pale, waiting for his reaction. Would he abandon her to save the deal he had worked so hard for? Gathering all his will, Diego told the Frenchman he would not participate in any slander against Camila, that he had no intention of publicly declaring her a fraud. They were stunned. This meant their business partnership would almost certainly collapse. They pressed him harder, threatened lawsuits for deception and scandal, but he held firm. Days of painful negotiations followed, until the partners officially announced the withdrawal of their investment. Diego lost the deal that could have opened the door to international markets, lost a piece of his reputation in the eyes of the business community, but inside, he felt a strange relief, as though he had finally made the right choice. When Camila learned of it, she was shaken. She never imagined he would sacrifice so much. It was hard for her to accept that he had taken such a blow for her, yet deep inside, warmth rose. She felt, perhaps for the first time, that she wasn't alone, that he truly hadn't betrayed her. They decided to leave the city for a while, so Camila could resolve the question of her family and her safety. There were several options: try to rebuild relations with her father, agreeing to remain silent about his affairs if he stopped hunting her, or escape to another country, farther from every threat, and only then attempt to rebuild ties with her family. Camila wavered. She feared returning to France, yet knew she couldn't keep running forever. Finally, Diego suggested a protective escort and proper legal preparation. He promised to hire a strong lawyer in France, and if her father truly was involved in illegal dealings, then they would either have to prove it or reach a compromise. Camila thanked him through tears, saying she might only bring him more trouble, that he was risking himself again. Diego answered that his business was one thing, but she was another entirely, and that he wasn't afraid to take risks for her. In that moment, Camila realized how deeply her feelings had changed. She felt for him something she had never felt for another man, a blend of gratitude, love, and respect. She remembered their first meeting in the subway passage and understood how far they had come since that day, how much they had both changed. Diego rejected half measures. If we're going to France, he told her, I want us to arrive there as a real couple, not as pretend husband and wife. Camila lowered her eyes in shy understanding. He made no formal proposal, but his gaze said enough. He wanted to be with her, and she let him know she wasn't against it. Then came the preparations for departure, wrapping up matters in his company, delegating responsibilities so it could run without him for a time. Camila called the few people in France she still trusted. One agreed to help her at least recover her official identity papers. Diego didn't know how the story would end. They might have to fight her family and corrupt power structures, but he was determined to stand beside her. They packed their bags and boarded a plane. Diego looked at Camila, and she looked at him, both aware of the long road ahead, dangerous, uncertain, but ready to face it together. He took her hand, and in both their eyes there was hope. Perhaps Diego's business would suffer losses, perhaps her father hadn't given up, and criminal threats were still real, but the greatest change was in their relationship. They had stopped playing roles, stopped using each other for advantage. Now they were drawn together by something genuine, a feeling worth risking everything for. Both had come to understand no amount of money, no false gains were worth more than human connection and a life free of fear. Camila no longer felt hunted and alone, and Diego had found something far more valuable than another investment, true attachment and love, the very things he had always lacked.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.